Hello everyone and welcome to my oil painting class. And today we're exploring the depths in painting, how we can use tone. We'll do a tonal study and how we can translate it into color, the tones translated into color and showing the depths of the landscape. So we've got a Glencoe Valley, beautiful mountains on the left and right. The photograph is quite dull in color. I quite like the composition, but I see so much potential in it. And also my camera is not always capable to pick up good colors or good lighting on objects in front if we have a bold, bright sky. So, or I could have shadows on my sky, for example, like here, or it's blocks it completely out and it's just a bleach space. But that's a really good tip for us how we can see some of the silhouettes. So we're going to interpret the photograph in front of us. We're going to mix some colors, mix some exciting greens, but we're mainly going to think about space, depth, and we're going to evaluate what our tones are. So on my palette, I have some white and black. I've got Payne's grey, but any black will be fine. I have some ochre, cadmium red, ruby. So I've got a orangey red and I've got a pinky red. Any variations, any titles of the paints will be fine. I have some violet, ultramarine, cerulean blue, blue-gray. Don't worry if you don't have it. We can always mix it from blue, black, and some white. Emerald green and olive green. Olive green is quite a yellowish green for me here. Sometimes olive green could come out in different colors, so we're looking for a yellowish, lighter type of green, warmer green. Now I'm going to be using orange background because we have quite a lot of greens, and leaving some of that orange and painting on that orange will be very exciting to make the greens sing, to have that glow of light through it. It's a little bit longer format. I'm just going to use it as some color sampling here again. Color sampling on a white paper or surface is different. The colors sit very differently on the orange, so that's what will be exciting for us to try. But before we get to colors, let's have a look at tones. I have a little plan here what we're going to do with our tones. We're going to divide all darknesses, all lights into three categories. Very light, okay, so it's about 0 to maybe 35%-ish approximately. We'll have a medium darkness between 35% to about 75%, something there. And then the rest will be a dark tone. So I could have painted the first box white, but I'm gonna just leave it blank. My last box is going to be black, okay, and subtones. Now to make my next darkness to black, I'm just going to use a little bit of tapes for this. I'm just going to have a tiny bit of white mixed with it. So it might appear quite dark, but just an off black. Okay. I'm just going to make sure it appear that slightly lighter tone. Okay, so we can just see that smaller version. Now, on our picture, our darks are probably going to be those mountains, the larger mountain on the left, and the small section of it we can see of the mountain on the right. Okay, so those two tones, yeah, those two will be our mountains. They will be the most dark ones. Now, I've got two pictures of tones. Now, this one was I just taken my photograph and used the black and white filter in Photoshop. And I just translated the colors into what's light, what's dark. And it looks quite dull, yeah? So, but it does divide my landscape into sky, a paler shape, and then everything else is quite dark, yeah? It's quite similar. So I just tried another filter. I think that was a cutout or not sure what it was. So it's given me a bit more of a silhouette. Yeah, so that's giving me more of a clear white for the sky, clearer understanding of shape for my mountains, and then the foreground with the grasses, with part of the valley, with the road, becomes more of a medium darkness. So those are the two we'll be looking for, the medium darkness. So I'm going to add a little bit more white to my black. And let's see if that will be a slightly paler, maybe tiny bit more. Okay. And that might be a similar darkness to my actual prime board. I think that's the one I actually have. Okay. And to subdivide, some of it will be slightly darker, some of it will be slightly lighter. We can subdivide it into another one. Yes, if I'll make a very small adjustment again with some white. Okay, no, maybe a little bit lighter so we can see that range. Okay, that's slightly lighter, that's good. Maybe tiny bit more. I think it's tiny bit more runny, so it doesn't quite show it as much. Okay, good. And again, I can test it on my board here. It's just tiny bit more lighter there than my existing gray. Okay. And then my white area, so this is going to be my valley. These are going to be my mountains darkness. And my lights is going to be my sky, including the shadows of the clouds. So this is a darkness, or shall I say the light, the shadows of the clouds I need to make. So it's almost an off-white. Yeah, for my lightest group. Okay, so I can start doing my design using those three groups. I tend to go for the lightest tone first because we already have our gray in place, our medium darkness. So let's find the light. So let's see the shape of the sky, of what that space is going to be, how much space it's going to take. And it's easier to see it. I find it's easier to see it in shapes. Let me just put a tiny bit more white on my brush. So I'm looking for, or I can use direct white, or I can use just a one-off. I think, actually, if I were to clean my brush, just cleaning it with some tips and wiping it on my tissue. If I just use direct white, but with a little bit of tips, so it's not overly thick, but it's easy to apply. And because it's not overly thick, it will be very easy for me to see the gray behind it. So it gives me that darkness instead of direct white. Very quickly. Okay, so that's maybe my mountain. And then if I want to have some fresh white for some extra highlights, I can use more thicker paint. Right, I'm going to find maybe my distant peak there. I think that's one of the three sisters. Okay. Tiny bit more tips for this. And overall where the valley is going to be and where this slope is starting. Okay. So it's easier to find all of this. Now, I'm not trying to paint lovely, wonderful clouds here. I'm just trying to find a shape of light for the sky altogether. And I can paint it quite even. Yeah, maybe this one will have a little bit more of a rise. Okay, maybe I need to move my mountain a little forward. I can do that by wiping some of the paint or by later on painting some more darker gray. I think I can just gently move it about by lifting some. So this is a really good approach to start planning your shapes. I quite like amending things, moving things about, using the gray surface. Okay, so maybe this one could be just moved about later on as well. Okay. Now, if I want to subdivide, if I'm looking at all of my lights, can I subdivide and find some extra white? Let's put some fresh white, perhaps in this lower part of the painting. Sorry, lower part of the sky, lower part of this section. Okay, so somewhere here, I'm painting slightly thicker so the white stays and it doesn't blend within my background. Okay, something here, and I can play with its variations of the clouds on a larger painting. So that might be enough information for it. Good. So light is sorted. Now the grays there, we can subdivide the gray. But maybe I'll come back to that later. Let's do another good impact. Let's find out dark. Like I didn't go for direct white first, I wouldn't go for direct black. I'll go for maybe a slightly lighter version of it. So let's mix now dark. Okay. Good. And let's apply it for all of that shape. So I can see that shape very easily. And often when we look at the photograph or image we're working from, or even outside when we're painting, it's hard to see those shapes. So helping ourselves with tools like Photoshop or even Word document, you've got some very simple image manipulating tools. Okay, so I've got the base of this mountain somewhere here. We can find exciting silhouette for it approximately for now. And we can define it better on a larger piece. Okay. And the right-hand side slope is right here. Okay. There might be something else darker here. Our gray probably will contain a little bit of extra lights, a little bit of the darker groups of tones, but overall it will read, yeah, somewhere in the center there. So I've done my darks. Can I make any more emphasis on extra black? Yeah, there are some definition of extra darkness there. So I'm going to put a little bit of strokes for some of the exposed rock here. As you can see, a little more shadows here, and then they're just a little more individual ones. Don't want to have too much details, but that's where some of the most dark areas are. Maybe a tiny bit more here on the ridge as well. Good. So again, on a small scale, it's easier for us to spot those areas, yeah? When we start painting a larger scale, we need to make sure we simplify them as well. We don't go into, oh, I can see a tiny bit of black here and a tiny bit of black here and a tiny bit of black here. So we need to see it all as a big shape. Right, I'm happy with that. And now let's do work a little bit more into our gray. Now, my surface tone was that darkness, so I need to find something tiny bit more paler. Not as light as my sky, but maybe something, yeah, something in between that 50% and 35% of light. Sometimes it takes time to mix those varieties of light and dark. So it's a good exercise. If you do it on your own, take your time mixing it. Just going to check the darkness. Yeah, that's about there. So I can see small extra features of light here in the valley. Okay. And also perhaps that mountain in the back. Not, yeah, it might be that darkness might have a little bit more extra tone to that. So if we smudged it, I can come back with that darkness. Right, anything else in here? Maybe a little slope here, maybe part of the stone wall, something there. Okay, and yes, when we'll have a little more darkness, and we'll start looking more into details on the larger piece. I might just have tiny bit more here. Some of the ferns here. Okay, which are somewhere here growing. I'll just keep them as a little plan of how much perhaps of that sub-darkness, that medium darkness will be developing there as well. And that will be the reason for my sketch. Yeah, I've identified my main shapes and I'm going to stop. That's giving me a plan. So if I'm painting sky, I shouldn't be getting into too much of my grays, yeah, or definitely not going into my blacks. If I'm painting my blacks and I'm suddenly seeing a house or path or something else, I can't go as light as sky. I have to stay together with those darknesses. Lovely. So now let's start doing a sketch for our composition on our actual painting. I will still use a little bit of turbs first, and because we're painting an orange background, I'm going to pick up some violet. Violet is lovely sitting against the orange. Yeah, it becomes quite brown, quite a quality type of color. Now I think I'm going to stay with this line, but I think I'm going to might be moving this line, my pencil line, to get a better format proportion. I think after here, I think I'll be painting. Right. So let's start the same. Let's look at our silhouettes of the mountains. Let's find it where it's gonna go. The left-hand side one mountain. Can you make sure that you don't glue it to the edge of the painting, please? Often you'll end up with a fantastic piece. By the time you put a mount or frame over it, it takes a little bit of space and then a little bit of space left, and the mountain looks like it's attached to the border of your painting. So I often deliberately give more space to the top of the mountain, to the top of the building, so it has that air to have around it. So my lines might be a little bit chunky, doesn't matter. I'm using tips, so it's not going to be too oily surface for us later on. Okay, let's drop it down. I'm still looking for that space of that white, yeah, how we identified it. So let's find it here. And maybe where my slope is going to be on the right hand side. Okay. Looking for those silhouettes, for those shapes. It's quite a nice bowl. So it's often, again, easier to see the shape of white or the shape of dark rather than to find the exact line. Okay. So let's do it that way. A bit, tiny bit more wider here. And let's just start dropping here. That's better. A bit of taps again. So I'm using a diluted violet, so it moves very easily around the painting. Right, next one. Let's find a little bit more details for the front, as we had very simple layout of shapes on our small sketch. Let's find there's a lighter diagonal coming across the valley. Might be some lighter vegetation there, might be a bit of light, maybe a bit of both. Okay, so it's almost the same line. There's a few more variety of things happening there. And then we can start seeing a little bit of the path of the road turning here as well. And it's almost as where the light is stopping. There's another little path coming from here. And again, it disappears behind the rock, starts getting more weaving about. Okay. Now, because my brush lines are quite wide, we're probably going to miss a few other details, like we can see a tiny bit of water here. Okay, it doesn't matter if we miss it out. So at the early stages, we can add them when we paint. I can see a little, maybe stone, maybe some logs. Something in this corner would be quite nice, a little stopping point in this corner. And then there is a bit of a line of the ferns. Okay, and they're coming up almost to that V point, and I think the path is changed, so the path is probably going behind the ferns. Yeah, so they're going to be somewhere here. So quite a steep angle for it. Now the path from behind is opening up and coming right towards us. I think I might be taking it a little further out. There we go. So my ferns only just sticking out to show you that those are the ferns. And behind them something tiny bit more darker as well, the other side of the path. So I quite like talking through what I'm seeing. It identifies the objects, it identifies why it's there. So what's this? So these are the row of ferns, and they're turning towards me, yeah, and then they're just coming around. And then this is the back of that path. If I just looked briefly, I might have just saw, oh, something dark, something here. I'm not too sure what it is. Let's ignore it. But talking through it actually gives you an opportunity to see things. Right, we can see tiny bit of, I think, part of the road and some of the vehicles there. I don't think I really need that. My path is lovely there, and then it disappears. Okay, tiny more things I might identify. Those extra exposed rock on my left-hand side mountain. Quite like its diagonal development, so it's a good idea for me to do it now. So if I want to think about the direction, the size, easy to do it now. So if it's not quite right, I can move them, I can wipe them, I can start again. Or even just drawing it and making decisions about them later. It's that visual recognition of shapes, visual acknowledgement of them. Okay, something's happening there. They're a little bit too similar in size, so maybe I'll put another one here. So some almost horizontal, but not. Some almost vertical, but not. Okay, so how the rock stood out under different angles is wonderful to see. Okay, so I'm slowly started to subdivide my darks here, and there will be also color coming in there as well. Right, clouds wise, I can see a stronger line for my clouds, and I haven't done my mountain at the back. Let's do a mountain at the back first. Again, to identify where it is. Sometimes I emphasize the size and make it deliberately bigger. Sometimes it's good to make that artistic choice. Okay, I think I'm okay to keep it more or less as it is. But then I can see approximately the cloud line. Okay, that's giving me an idea there as well. So it is a working sketch. I'm not looking for perfection. I'm looking for a discussion within my own work and ability to move things about and amend things. Right, I'm happy with that. Let's take a quick photograph of this stage and let's get our colors out. Right, so for the next stage, I also would like to use a piece of paper to test some of my strokes. Now, this is a white piece of paper because I want to test in the direction of the strokes. I'm going to test something for the sky, and I'm going to use similar strokes for some of the land. So my plan is to use a wider brush. You can also use a sponge or cloth or any other larger brush you might have. Again, I'm just going to use a little bit of Turbs first because it's more liquid there, and also because I want to have slightly runnier surface. And for example, I'm going to use a bit of that grey just to see how that application of paint is going to come in. So first of all, if I were to place my brush almost flat to the surface, can I make some exciting strokes? Can I turn and twist? It's actually loaded up quite nicely with a little bit of variety of slightly more paint on one side and less on the other side. So quite exciting strokes. Can I make clouds out of this? Can I just rub it a bit more, twist the brush, turn the brush, rotate the brush? I'm interested for exciting, spontaneous marks. I often do this before I start painting. Gives me an opportunity to mix color. I'm not at the moment mixing color. I'm mainly looking at mark making, but also a different format, a different texture for the sky, maybe a land might be differently, yeah? What type of marks, what type of exciting strokes can we create? We can always work with smaller strokes, but those larger initial ones are very exciting. So for example, for some of the valley strokes, I might use my my flat brush with some longer strokes, yeah? Almost dragging, yeah? So it's using that ability to explore our marks. And the flat brush, look, just split in here, yeah? And it's a lovely thing. So don't throw away your old brushes. They often give us some marvelous textures. What about some of the rock areas? Some of that texture on the mountain. Can I just create it? Yeah. And again, this is more diluted paint. So perhaps using lighter, not thick paint, but diluted, lighter loaded brush might give us some exciting textures. Yeah, we can always paint over it. There's some might be opportunities for me to explore some of that rock areas. We can always paint over it with thicker layers, but it's that transparency and that mark, freedom, yeah, is very exciting. Right, anything else I can do with ferns? How would I plan? I could be picking up a different brush. I just want to play with my larger one, with a larger brush. How would I paint the texture if I were for the ferns? Maybe it would be just a little representation of detailed, yeah, dazzling light coming out from it. So it looks like more of a busier area with something down that slope. Yes, so I'm trying to explore the shape, direction. Okay. So what we've been doing, we've been breaking things down into light and dark. We've been breaking things down into mark making and spontaneous things. Now let's have a look at a little bit more at the color. So things like that we could always do first, or let's say we need to paint the sky, we make some color, we test it out on the paper, which you can throw away. Nobody need to see it, but I would like to see it as part of our process, of our learning process. But it's nothing. It's not a final picture. It's not overly interesting for us as a final development, but it's part of that important process of exploration and development. Okay, so I'll leave that one aside. I'm going to clean my brush a little bit. My sky is going to be first, and it will have some gray, so I will keep this brush for my sky. And what I'm going to do next, I'm going to use my 3 oils. Just going to lift it from my small pot. Might just need to pour a bit more. So it becomes quite oily. And I want to get, okay, quite a lot of gray comes out from it. I need some more white, as I'm going to start with quite diluted white. I just squeeze some extra on here. Okay. And by the time it will mix with my white, that gray will be going. So I'm going to start with a little bit of white, and then I'll add some ultramarine to it as well. Let me just top up my 3 oils. My big brush has taken all of it quickly. So I want to have my paint quite runny. So white with the oil, quite runny. Let's test it out. So that's quite transparent. I can even drag it more, okay? And if I were to use a thicker white, this is the appearance of it, okay? So it's got more chunks. I can see quite thick relief of the bristles, rougher bristles, when diluted paint is quite soft, and I can see that orange through it as well. So my plan is to go quite loosely with this oily surface. Okay, I want to have a little play here. That's why I quite like painting outside of my picture, so I can crop it later, because my brush will be quite playful. Yeah, turning it around, moving it about. even if I were to paint over it, it still gives me that wonderful, wonderful insight to the clouds. Okay, something a bit more here. Good. Right, can I start using some thicker paint? Now I can have more white, and I'm going to have a small dab of ultramarine. Small dab, look how quite a lot of that comes through. So small amount would have been plenty. I'm gonna need tiny bit of Payne's Grey or your black. Okay, that's quite dark to what I wanted, so I'm going to wipe it off my brush and bring a little bit more white to it. Okay. Tiny, tiny, tiny bit more back to blue. Just a lighter version of it. Okay. Let's bring a bit more of a cloud here. Cloud shadow. And I'm interested to see if some of this paint might run. Some of this paint might stay placed straight away. It might catch more dry surface and it will be not changing. Okay, so maybe tiny bit more paint here. Can I put tiny, tiny, tiny bit more extra darkness? Just very small amount increasing of that darkness. Now, I need to constantly think that my sky should stay the lightest, so I can't go too dark. If it appears not dark enough for my shadows, maximum I can do is increase the contrast. Maybe I need to bring more fresh white elsewhere, and then the darkness will be appearing dark when it's actually is not direct darkness. Okay, I'm happy with that one now. So big strokes. I'm also very excited to see partially that orange on the background where the sky is peeping through. Now I think I'm ready for a slightly smaller brush with which I can apply slightly thicker paint. Again, I'm going to go for some more white, a little bit of oil just to keep my white more soft. I'm going to start now with direct white. And let's find the silhouette of the mountain here, almost as what we did in our black and white sketch. A bit more thicker paint. Right, if we don't want the paint sliding on the painting, which started for me, it means that I had too much oil on my brush. So I wiped my brush on a tissue, and now the paint goes exactly where I want it to be. Okay, I can define my light and the distance. Okay. And now I'm going to start merging my white with my existing strokes of gray. And that's that sliding, slimy surface will start interacting with this thick paint. And most lovely, sometimes tricky to apply because it keeps sliding off. But it gives us some wonderful textures. I can keep on bringing that white, maybe tiny bit of paler gray, paler blue. This is when I can use my blue gray. In a way, I have been already mixing it without using a fresh blue gray. Okay, maybe something in between here. Okay. So we're starting to see more and more of the silhouette of the sky, that positive space of light. Okay, maybe another little opening of paler color somewhere gonna come in. Okay, maybe some of my initial strokes of gray are starting to be a bit more plain, so can I add to them a bit more, maybe by lifting some of the surface, not deliberately, but it's quite a soft, runny paint on the surface, so that's lovely darknesses now. Quite exciting. Might just soften this little bit of border. And at this stage, you will start having your own processes happening on your painting. You can use a palette knife for some extra thick application. You can use, again, your thicker, wider brush. Yeah, you can have a little bit of everything going on. Good. Maybe a tiny bit more light somewhere here, just for more varieties. I also prefer if you were to paint a little bit more over the silhouette of your mountains, because we can always bring the darker mountains over our sky, but it's harder for us to paint the sky again. Right, am I happy with that? I just cover some of this orange a little bit and maybe a little bit more depth here by just bringing the brush over and moving the paint across, and it's giving me more of a variety here. Good. Right, I'm going to stop on the sky here. And let's mix some colors for our greens. Right, so now let's have a look at our greens. Most of our valley and the mountains got loads of varieties of it. And let's create exciting greens, not just dull greens we see in a photograph. So I'm going to start with picking up some white. White is going to be my base for my colors. So if I want to have the colors opaque, okay, my white will be the base for it. So if I were to pick up some emerald green, okay, so that's quite a bold color. If I put it here on my board, it looks a little bit better. It's a bit more softer because it has the orange behind it, but I don't think we'll actually use it as it is. We'll be mixing it with other colors. So for example, emerald green and some ochre. Okay, and again, this is a good exercise. You can take your time just mixing some greens and coming up with varieties. So it depends how much ochre I'll put. I will have a slight variations of the colors. Now this color looks very similar to my olive green. This is just a bit more transparent without white, yeah? So if I were to add a bit more ochre and a bit more white, we're almost there. So sometimes it's easier to use direct color because it's already, you know, what it's going to be. But let's make a slightly more yellowish version out of it. Okay, we can just about see it. Maybe a tiny bit more even white in there. Okay. And can I make a bit more darker version out of it? Just adding a bit more emerald green. So that will be another version. Okay. Without washing my brush, I can also start adding a tiny bit of cadmium red. That will give me extra darkness because green and red are opposite colors. They actually give me a very dark color here. I'm going to put maybe a next row here. It's very exciting green, kind of hacky type of green. Okay. But again, can I make it lighter? Yes, that will be quite exciting tone as well. Close to this one, we mixed with ochre, but it has less saturation of light in it, of that warmth in it. Yeah, it's a bit more duller. Okay. Can I have a little bit more red in it, more of a browny appearance? Yeah, and again, for some of the valley slopes, that might be quite a good color. Okay, tiny bit more, maybe it will end up with more red in it than green. Will give us a lovely browny color. Again, to show maybe some of the heather, some of the dry grasses. And what about if I'll come back and add more emerald green to my paint here? So now instead of adding more red, I'm adding more green, maybe both. So it will be a dark version. Okay, so that will be an interesting look how excitingly dark that is. Okay, and again, can I spot it in some maybe slopes, some of the cut grass, small quantities of it in there. Okay, good. And what about now if I'm going to clean my brush? Well, I'm mainly going to wipe it and take some of the chunky volume of paint away. And again, start now perhaps mixing my green with some of the blues. So I'm going to start with some white. I can have a small amount of ochre there. So the color will stay a little bit more opaque. So emerald green. And what about if I'll use a little bit of ultramarine? Okay, that's quite nice. That might be some of the colors we'll start spotting maybe on this part of the mountain. It goes further away, we've got that extra coolness. Yeah. If I add a little bit more blue to that and a bit more stronger green. So again, we're looking for a darker option. So we're looking at some of those shadows, yeah, as well. If I want the lighter version of it, so I'm not changing the color, I'm just adding a bit more white. We'll see more true color of it. But sometimes we also need a little bit of light in the slope. So we're almost back to the initial one. That one's got a little bit of warmth. Okay, it's quite exciting. Again, lovely to see these colors against the orange. That's why I left little gaps. Okay, what about if I'll leave a tiny gap between the colors? How they will start interacting here as well. Okay, what about if I'll do the same color, but I'm going to wipe my brush and add a small amount of tips or oil and use it a bit more diluted and see that orange background through it. So I'm just going to lift it a little bit. Yeah. Again, that's a very different, so that's a blue, all kind of bluish turquoise color, but against the orange, smudged orange background, it's very, very much green appearance. Very exciting. Right, another option for my mountain colors. If I use a little bit of violet and my emerald green. Now, if I'll mix those two together without white, it's going to be almost like black, solid darkness. If I'll do it on the side here. So we're not going to see much of the color. It just appears very, very dark. The moment I add a little bit more white, we'll start seeing more variations of blues in it. A little bit of that violety purple. Okay, so if I add a bit more violet and green again with small amount of white, maybe this time having more violet than green. Again, these might be the colors for one of my mountains. Okay, that's quite a fluorescent, quite strong, almost bold, extra bold ultramarine. Maybe in small quantities, that might be quite exciting to see. Okay, good. So we've got lovely sunny greens. We've got more of a valley browns and warmer greens, and we have a range of cool greens. And let's give it a little play. So my plan is to start with some of our darker mountains, those some of the darker greens and darker rocky colors, and then we descend down to our valley and get some of the lighter, paler colors as well. So remember how we used a very large brush for the sky? I'd like to do something similar for the ground, for the mountains as well. But my very big brush is full of white and gray, so I might use my next size brush available. And I'll do the same with that, but load it with darker color. So my oils first, then I'm gonna go for some violet, some emerald green, a little bit more runny paint, sorry, runny oil, and I'm going to apply it on my mountains here. And the exciting part here is to see the orange. I can bring a little bit more violet, I can bring a little bit more stronger green in different areas, and that orange will start behaving very different. You can also see a little bit of my strokes. Okay, how the textures of the strokes is remaining here. Remember how we were exploring the strokes on the brush? That might be somewhere here. So it appears black, but the more close we look, we see more color. And also by the time we'll add other colors, bordering with it, overlapping it, it will no longer appear black. The colors will start interact with white in our future paints. Right, and I might put a little bit more of similar color here, maybe a little bit more ultramarine for me here, fancy bit of ultramarine here. And that's where I find it's easy to paint a little bit over of the size that I need. Can always cut it back. Okay, quite exciting. If there's some of the paint runs, that's okay. Lovely. Now I'm going to wipe this paint off. Loads of wiping of the brushes today. And again, we'll need some extra white before we start adding. Right, I'm just running out of my white here again. Before I start adding some darker greens. And like we've done with the clouds, I'd like to bring the green with more thick paint. So my white will have maybe a little bit of ochre, a little bit of emerald green. I think this is what I've got on my palette. Yes, it's maybe some of these colors are here, so maybe a little bit of cadmium red. Okay. I might just make my color slightly darker first because I'm going to paint some of the dark areas. So I'm going to add more red to my green and a little bit more green, emerald green to that. So overall, the color appears more, slightly more darker. Okay. And let's introduce some of the little platforms of light. And I can adjust the color as well. In some places will be more greenish and some a bit more brownish. So that will be quite exciting to bring that more solid paint and almost sculpt the surface, amend the surface, sculpt the surface, find those little green plateaus. Okay, little drop somewhere here. Okay, maybe again that narrow opening. Okay. Maybe a larger space. This is your interpretation of it. Don't try to copy every single little sub-step of darkness there. Just look for overall shapes and look for overall direction of them. That will be more important than anything else. We can tweak other things. Quite like now how that darker tone with orange appears here and there. Okay, and I can just still manipulate my lovely green here and slowly going to descend into the lower part of the valley. And I have got my paler green here, some of that lighter green I had before, so I can start bringing it here as well. Becoming very exciting. Okay, still quite a lot of darks here. I want to do a bit more. I think a larger scale painting would have been really exciting, but not to worry. Maybe a tiny bit of that green might come in here as well. But I think I also want to see a little bit more blue there. So I think if I were to pick up some ultramarine with a little bit of white, so we can actually see the color. I think that slope might have a little more fresh blue there as well. Not a huge amount. It still appears as a dark silhouette, but it has that extra quality of color. Maybe further bridge at the back, yeah, when maybe there will be a bit of water, might just be offsetting that light. Okay, good. Now can I find a little bit of blue, a stronger ultramarine and emerald green on my left-hand side slope? I think maybe somewhere in a couple of places. I can just have a little hint of it and enrich the surface here with color. Maybe partially blend it with my greens or my other shadows. Might be a little bit of that blue coming up somewhere here alongside of the path. Very interesting. Good. Anything else at the top for the peak here? Okay. And I want to introduce some paler color and a little bit more light, so it looks still quite dull as on my duller photograph. I want to start slowly introducing a bit more color and light to my medium tones. So I've just wiped my brush. I'm going to start introducing a little bit more light. But let's take a quick break for a photograph of this stage. Right, so slightly lighter colors for our mountains in the valley. I think I'm going to go the most light greens I want to pick. Maybe in the lower part of the valley on that diagonal slope, maybe this part of the path, and then find closer darkness and a bit more softer, less saturated with yellows, maybe colors later. So I'm going to start with some white, as always. Okay, my brush is not overly clean, but it will get mixed a little bit of my color from it. I'm going to go for some olive green. Okay. So that's quite a light color, quite a sunny. The more I work the white into that paint, it gives me that boldness of the extra sunshine. You can still use small amount of ochre, or you could have even used cadmium yellow. I didn't get some cadmium yellow, so I'm going to stay with my olive green and ochre. Okay, I think that's would be good. Tiny bit more white maybe. So my lighter tones for the medium darkness, yeah? Remember we said we can go tiny bit more towards the light, but it shouldn't be anything too pale. So as long as my lighter greens don't clash with the sky, we're on a good track with tones. My orange background is darker than my sky. So if I'm in a similar darkness as the orange, I'm on the right track. Okay, good. Let's put some of those lighter strokes in here. Let's put a little bit more green, so I had a bit more yellowish green. Now I'll have a bit more of that olive green, slightly changing, but very, very small amount. I'm just going to put a few dabs of it here in the valley. This is going to be a lovely, playful connections of colors. My paint is thick, so I've got quite a lot of control. But at the same time, in between strokes, I can see little gaps of orange here and there. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes they're not intentional, but they are lovely how the little bit of that orange is staying unpainted. Maybe a little diagonal coming through here. Okay. So try not to paint everything perfectly. Give a little more light, so my background color, background orange to stay, to keep. Okay, good. Just to see where my path is, so I'm not going to lose it, I'm going to pick up some fresh white and a little bit of ochre. I think there's some, maybe a bit more pink in there, my pinky red. Okay, but it's quite light, so I'm going to have a bit more white for that. And it's going to be somewhere here. So I'm not going to lose it in between my greens. It's will later on will mingle and get lost in the greens with that little paler color. That could stay a little bit as pale as some of the clouds, shadows, some of the lights, because it's small amounts, it's not going to be significant. and I might make its appearance somewhere else. If the strokes for the path come out too wide, let them be first, and then we can narrow that line down with the colors bordering it. And I quite like the path a little bit higher up, but it's got slightly more darkness in it because surrounding colors will be slightly darker. So I'm adding a bit more pink and a tiny hint of violet. And if I paint it as a big chunk, I'll just put a tiny bit more thicker paint here first. But if I paint it as a big chunk, then I can again border it with other colors and turn it to a narrower path after. So I'm going to leave some, picked up some green by accident. So let's place that one somewhere here. It looks quite dull color at the moment, but I can see the pink in it. I can see a bit of violet in it. I can see that potential of the actual color remaining. Okay, that's good. Maybe a similar color might come somewhere here for potential stone wall. Okay, I'm going to wipe my brush. I'm going to get some more medium greens, medium darkness greens. Again, a little bit more white, so my brush is not empty. And let's have some of my emerald green, my ochre, my cadmium red. Okay, if it comes out too brown, you can always add more green. If it's come out too green, you can always add a little bit more red. And also just see, you mix the color, where can you place it? More reddish version or more greenish version or more yellowish ochre version? Yeah, where can you put it? All of those variations will be wonderful. Right, I'm going to test it perhaps somewhere here. Merge it with some of my blues and merge it a little bit more with some of my shadows. So I can shrink some of the shadows. Okay, and can I start bringing it a little bit above into my slopes? Maybe a small amount. So it gently will start blending, just small amounts at a time. Yeah, we've got a little bit of extra light appearing now on the mountain. Okay, I'll do a little ridge here, or maybe a little flat plateau. Okay. Can I put a little bit of extra light maybe on the side here on the shallower slope? So my earlier colors are supporting that extra light. Okay, it's starting to have a bit more sunshine in there. Maybe a bit more here. And I keep topping up my paint from a fresh palette color because there is quite a lot of darkness on the slopes of the mountains and it will kind of contaminate it quite quickly. Okay, maybe a little bit more here. So a little mark and stop and kind of observe and see how it appears. It starts being a bit more alive. Yeah, a bit more of that playful light is happening there. Good. Also want to make sure that you know those little diagonal slopes divisions, yeah, they're not all the same widths or the same height, not the same, not to the same. Okay, good. Can I make anything else here? Maybe a small amount, not to overdo the light. Good. Now, while this one's going well, let's pick up tiny. I'm just wiped my brush on a tissue and there's a lot of paint, so I can transport it back on my palette for later use, perhaps. I think I can put tiny bit more light into a couple of slopes to show straight slightly more light there. I'm gonna go for some fresher ochre and olive green. I want that yellowish green color. We only want a tiny bit amount. There might be just that little extra light coming here. Then it mingles with a lower light area here. There might be just on that border, might be just a cloud parting and giving us that little extra sunshine. It might be harder for us to do it now because there's quite a lot of paint in that area. So the thicker paint you will have, the more likelihood for you to keep it in place, unless if you're using a palette knife. Okay, that might be a nice little surface of light. I'm happy with that. Anything else here? I think maybe a little bit more light here. Good. And I'm going to bring a little bit more of that light somewhere here as well. Ready for some of the shadows to come to my medium darkness. Good. Right, and let's come back to slightly darker tones, maybe some of those browns, some of that browny green, emerald green mixed with cadmium red, and we still have some ochre in our brush. I'm gonna cover some of that surface, just looks a little bit similar in width. Gonna vary that a little more. And let's define my paths here. You can paint now in any order. There's not particular reason why I'm starting on this side. I could have started developing more things here. Doesn't matter. Let's have a little bit more of that narrow path. Okay. If it's not quite strong in definition, maybe I'll have tiny bit of violet mixed. It will give me a stronger contrast. And that path might be disappearing. Just got that little hint for it. Another thing you can do is to use a little wooden wedge to scrape the paint away if you painted too much. Okay, sometimes that gives us just enough to see that orange background. Okay, I might just narrow it again down a little more. And let's paint a little more darkness in this corner. And then I can offset my path in the valley here as well, just bordering it. I'm not going to paint the darker color on the path everywhere, but at some point it's might have more of a slope in the valley. They might have some more trees, so that's why it looks slightly darker. So I tend not to keep it as a dark line, but more of a shape. So it might be a blending tone. There might be something else. So it doesn't continue as a line, but we definitely see that shape standing out stronger now. And this might be covered by some of the vegetation here as well. Okay. Same on the slope here. Might just emphasize its curve a little more. That's how I'm narrowing my line down as well. I find it hard to paint a narrow, thin line in oils, but painting around it will help me to identify it Okay, I just smudged it more than I need to. So again, I can scratch it back. Okay, that's a bit better. Good. The slopes of the valley of the mountains looking good. Valley looking good. Let's paint maybe some of the ferns. I will then paint them dark, like we painted the mountain. Maybe not as dark as that, but I'm going to pick up some more diluted violet, maybe a bit more diluted green. Okay. Maybe more towards the green this time. Or if it's too dark, I can always add a little bit of palette color of paler green. So that will be just appearance of a darker color will be enough. And the ferns in that picture are reasonably small in size. So I'm just going to place exciting strokes, some more interested in the body of darkness, and applying the paint sideways with my brush allows the oil from the bristles to come out and kind of spread on the surface of the painting. So when I'm ready to apply thicker strokes of lighter branches of lighter ferns, yeah, highlights, they will not, they will be brought very easily in. Right, so now a bit more thicker paint. Again, let's load some fresh white. Let's go for some olive green, maybe as a starting point. I think I will need, let's go for a little bit of ultramarine. That will be a lovely green. We haven't mixed ultramarine with olive green. Okay, they're kind of coming too close to some of these colors. Okay, good. So let's play some texture. Let's create some texture for the stems and leaves. To have more sharper pointy lines or sharper mark making on top of runnier surface, I need to keep my paint on the tip of the brush. So I mix my color first, and then I'm going to squeeze it from the brush by pressing it against my palette, and then lift it just on top of the bristles. If it didn't happen, again, squeeze the brush, clean it with your tissue, so you get all the paint from the roots of the brush. You can collect all the paint and put it back on your palette, yeah? But that's how I'll keep the paint on the tip of my brush here. And then perhaps do some playful mark making, finding maybe some of the texture of the ferns. Okay, close to us here. I think the ferns at the back might need to have a little bit more light here. That's better. Okay, and the path, I quite like it. We're mingling it with a bit of orange, maybe partially leaving it quite orangey, maybe even use that wooden wedge to take some of the paint off so it doesn't look too precise. Good. I need a bit more white, I think, and that might be a little stronger highlight. A couple of more. Yeah, some thicker paint little dabs of maybe reflecting sunshine. Again, still thinking that all of this is need to be within our gray surface. So if there is very small amounts of paler color, which might be competing with some of our clouds, small amounts will be absolutely fine. The more busy you will make that area, the more kind of it might just take too much attention from it. But I think we'll be fine here with that volume. Okay. A little bit harder to see on your screen, sorry, on my screen for you. That range of greens. But what I'm doing, I'm trying to make some strokes slightly larger, some strokes slightly smaller. As ferns, grasses are coming close to me, the further they will go away or down the slope, they will become more calmer. Okay, maybe a little bit more calmer here as well, so that shadow is stopping. Maybe a tiny bit more shadow on the edge of the path here. Further away from kind of for the far end of the path, it's quite nice darkness. The moment I pick up a tiny bit of that violet, it mixes well with the greens and it interacts so well with orange. I really enjoy using it with my landscapes. Just playing with the path here, what might work here better. Right, I'm not forgetting that I'm trimming that. So don't need to over worry here. Just filling up some of the orange spaces here. Okay, that's okay. Now I'm deciding, do I need to have a stone wall here, or can I just carry on? Maybe a little stone with a blue color, maybe ultramarine. Let's see if that color-wise, my paler pink violet color in that corner partially disappeared, but if I were to enhance it with some blue, I think it might have a nice reference to my mountains there. Bit of artistic license. Okay, if I add a hint of green to it, might be moss, there might be other grasses around it. It's more of the shape of color than exact definition of what it is now. If I wanted more of a silhouette and contrast, we can use some of that violet, like I just done some more definition here. Then maybe we can have a little more definition. Started to be more like a texture of more sharper wall, stone wall or something in there. Maybe a little more paler corner for it than if it is a stone. So feel free turning it into a tree, view from a valley, just extending your greens, or thinking of other options. Okay, maybe something there. Something not to take too much attention. Okay, that's good. Right, that's all okay. That's going to be trimming that. Now I just need to paint my mountain in the back. I left it till the end, almost because I wanted to see my medium tones developing, how much light we'll introduce, how much sunshine we'll introduce before I'll make my decision on how light that mountain is going to be at the back. So let's clean our brushes and make the final touches for that mountain as well. Right, so for the mountain in the back, let's have a bit more light. I think maybe a smaller brush as well will be good. So I'm gonna have some extra white. Okay, and let's start with some maybe yellowish green for some light. If I can make it the most wonderful, exciting green light in the painting, that would be great. Or as light as. So I'm going for olive green, a little bit of ochre. I want to emphasize that light on the mountain there, so that's going to come here. Ideally, reasonably thick in paint. I think mine is a little bit runnier than I want to, so it will be harder for me to keep it in place. It might be moved about by other colors. So I'm making quite large patterns of that green because they will be shrinking with the shadows on that mountain there. Right, so light is there. Let's paint some paler green but more cooler green. So I'm going to add some more maybe cerulean to my paint so it looks much more paler. Yeah, for the distant mountain that would be quite nice. Will still stand out darker than my sky, but against the orange it's quite pale. Against definitely those highlights I put a moment ago, it's definitely darker. Okay, maybe a tiny bit more cerulean, maybe a tiny bit more ochre. Okay, it's less. I didn't go for emerald green because it will give me much more cooler green, and also a slight variation in color, not so jumpy dark green. Okay, that's a lovely color as well. Maybe somewhere here on the top. And I'm going to gently blend it with my earlier green and with my shadow here. So that's how the shadow could be shrinking. Sorry, the highlights will be shrinking here. And I want the back of the mountain to have a little bit more paler blue. So I'm going to go for my gray blue. That's maybe a bit too pale, but with a small amount of ultramarine. I could have used white, but blue-gray already close to the darkness I want. Yeah, so it just kind of gives me an opportunity to cut the time and mix in the color. Okay, so somewhere here, that maybe paler blue will come in here. And maybe even I'll overlap it with some of my greens. Maybe tiny bit more darker. That's quite nice. And maybe somewhere else a little stroke. So then the lit up sunny highlight is getting even brighter from that. Okay. I think I might need another slightly darker stroke to establish that slope a little steeper. Okay, that's quite nice. And maybe my highlight on the paler green I put might need to be a bit more sharper on a couple of edges. Okay. Maybe a little bit of that sharpness to come in. And again, we want the sharpness, but we also want the softness. It's a bit of a both we want. So I'm going to soften some of them highlights, borders, and preserve the others. I'm liking that side. Maybe now gently integrating that color here as well. Bringing my shadow back if I smudge some of that. Okay, that's good. Let's bring that block of white a bit lower. And we had a tiny bit of perhaps water reflecting there in this little corner. If you want to add anything, I'm gonna bring some fresh white if I can get a clean white here. So I've got my fresh white here, very thick, no oil on my brush, really chunk of it there. So I just want to have a little glimpse of that white, perhaps. It's too much, I can take some of it off. That's better, that's quite nice. That's good. Can I put the similar paler color, maybe a tiny bit on my path somewhere here, my road. That's quite nice, reflecting maybe the light of the sky. That's just giving it a nice little touch up. And then that darker tone could shrink again if it's too wide, its width. Right, and I think I'm happy to stop. Loads of lovely things going on, but the painting ended up much more exciting in greens and in variety of subtones, and the photographs is exactly what I wanted. I wanted a bit more of the juiciness of color, a range of runny paint and thick paint, so we see that lovely orange, especially on the sky and through some of the shadows and through some of the backgrounds. I'll do some more zoom in photographs for us to see. But thank you very much for painting along with me. And I look forward to seeing your paintings soon. Doesn't matter how long it's going to take you, or if you paint it quite quickly. Just try to enjoy the process, mix the color, refer to your tone, and eventually you'll get that beautiful depth in your painting. So thank you very much, and see you soon again.